I want you to just take a second and imagine the sound of the ancient world.
Okay.
And I don't mean, I don't mean the wind blowing through the ruins of some temple or the quiet echo of a museum hall. I mean the actual noise, specifically the sound of chariot thunder.
Oh, wow. That is a very specific, very aggressive kind of frequency you're tuning into right
It
there.
is. It really is. Because usually when we picture the Bronze Age, we think of static things,
Right.
statues, hieroglyphs, quiet things. But today, we are looking at a source that just screams action. We're doing a deep dive into a piece of media titled Mitanni Horse Lord, an Indo-Aryan epic of ancient Egypt.
And right off the bat, I mean, that title alone is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, it is.
It's directly challenging the standard narrative because usually when people talk about the superpowers of the Bronze Age, they really only talk about Egypt.
True.
Or maybe the Hittites if they're feeling adventurous.
Right, Egypt kind of sucks up all the oxygen in the room. But this source material, which by the way includes the full metadata, the marketing copy, and a really detailed table of contents by the author's Story Buddies play, it's forcing us to look at the other side of the map.
Yes.
It promises a story about the world's first superpowers really just crashing together.
Yeah.
And I use the word crashing because this is set in the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia.
And it's interesting you focus on that word crashing because looking at the genre tags we have here, historical romance, military historical fiction, and epic fantasy, this is definitely not a textbook.
No, definitely not.
It's a narrative experiment. It's trying to blend very accurate geopolitical history with high-octane fantasy tropes.
Well, the source material actually uses a phrase that I think perfectly captures what we're about to unpack today.
Yeah.
It says steel and silk.
I saw that. It's a brilliant shorthand, honestly.
Yes, right, steel and silk. It implies that this era wasn't just about the hardware.
The chariots and the bronze swords.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was also about the soft power, the diplomacy, the marriages, the forbidden passion that gets mentioned in the blurb.
Which was the actual reality of the late Bronze Age. Historians often call this specific period the era of the Club of Great Powers.
The Club of Great Powers?
Yeah, you had Egypt, Babylon, the Hittites, and the Mitanni. And they were all writing these letters to each other, trading massive amounts of gold and marrying off their daughters just to keep the peace.
So it was an incredibly interconnected, high-stakes game of risk.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the elephant, or rather the horse in the room, the Mitanni.
Yes.
The description calls our hero a Mitanni Horse Lord and a rider from the north. Now, be honest, if I stopped 10 people on the street today, how many of them know who the Mitanni actually were?
Maybe one, if you're really lucky and happen to stop an archaeologist.
Right.
But back in the 15th and 14th centuries BCE, the Mitannis were an absolute juggernaut. They controlled northern Mesopotamia and Syria. They were essentially the buffer state that kept everyone else in check.
But here is the part of the metadata that really tripped me up initially. The title explicitly says Indo-Aryan epic.
Yep.
Now, when I hear Indo-Aryan, I immediately think of India. I think of the Vedas. What is that doing in a story set in ancient Syria and Egypt?
Well, this is one of those historical facts that almost sounds like fiction, but it's completely real. The Mitanni elite, the ruling class of this empire, actually had Indo-Aryan names.
Really?
Yeah, and they worship deities that are strikingly similar to the Vedic gods of India. Gods like Indra, Varuna, Mitra.
Wait, so you have kings in the ancient Middle East worshiping the exact same gods as the people in the Indus Valley?
Exactly. It points to a shared linguistic and cultural ancestry. So when the book calls this an Indo-Aryan epic, it isn't just throwing buzzwords around. It's grounding the story in a very specific, incredibly fascinating cultural pocket.
Wow.
He's not just a generic barbarian from the north. He comes from a very specific heritage.
That adds a whole new layer to the clashing cultures tag in the keywords. Because it's not just political anymore, is it?
No.
It's cosmological.
Precisely. And the Horse Lord part is just as technical. The Mitanni elite were known as the Marianu. They were this highly specialized caste of chariot warrior.
Kind of like medieval knights.
Think closer to fighter pilots, honestly.
Later pilots, okay.
The chariot was the supreme weapon of the age. And the Mitanni, they perfected the light spoked wheel chariot, a vehicle that could completely outmaneuver anything Egypt had on the battlefield at the time.
So when the source says the hero is a legendary warrior sent to aid Egypt in a desperate war, he's basically bringing cutting-edge military tech with him.
Absolutely. He is the ultimate weapon.
Okay, so we've got our steel, the tech, the warrior class. Now let's look at the silk.
Let's do it.
The other protagonist is described as a formidable Egyptian princess, also listed as the desert princess, and the blurb promises a forbidden passion that blooms between them.
And this is exactly where the historical romance genre kicks in, but we have to remember in this historical context, romance is incredibly dangerous.
Dangerous why? Because her dad is technically considered a living god.
Well, that, but also because in this era, princesses were currency.
Oh, right.
They were diplomatic bargaining chips used to seal very important treaties. If an Egyptian princess falls in love with a foreign general, even a legendary horse lord, that completely breaks the script. It threatens the entire political order.
So the forbidden love isn't just a plot device to make the reader swoon. It's a literal geopolitical crisis.
Exactly. The source material specifically mentions the machinations of kings and gods. If these two characters go off script, entire empires could fall.
So let's walk through the narrative arc itself because we actually have the table of contents.
Which is incredibly helpful.
It really gives us a clear map of how this whole story escalates. Segment 1 clearly seems to be the setup. We start with Chapter 1, titled The Rider from the North.
That is your classic stranger in a strange land trope.
Yep.
The hero arrives in Egypt, and you really have to imagine the culture shock for him. He's coming from the wide-open plains of the north to the crowded, highly bureaucratic, river-fed society of the Nile.
And it looks like he doesn't get much time to sightsee either. Because Chapter 2 is Pharaoh's summons.
Straight to the top.
Yeah.
That confirms the high stakes immediately. He's not there to just guard some obscure border fort. He is there to interact directly with the living god king.
That we get the moment I think everyone reading a romance is waiting for in Chapter 3. Eyes of the Desert Princess.
The classic meet cute.
The meet cute, exactly.
But given what follows, I highly suspect this isn't going to be love at first sight. It's probably going to be highly contentious.
What makes you say that?
Take a look at Chapter 4, Oath of Steel and Gold.
Oh, wow. Steel and gold. I love the symbolism there.
It's very transactional, isn't it? Egypt was historically famous for its vast amounts of gold. Foreign kings were constantly writing to the pharaoh, literally begging for gold.
Right, the whole Club of Great Powers thing you mentioned.
Exactly. And the Mitanni in this story are providing the steel, the military protection.
So this chapter is basically the contract. We protect you, you pay us.
Right. And where does romance fit into a cold business deal?
It doesn't.
Exactly, that's the friction. The relationship starts off as a pure exchange of commodities, steel for gold. To turn that dynamic into a relationship of equals is going to be the core conflict of this first act.
And it seems like not everyone in Egypt is happy about this deal. Because Chapter 5 is the training grounds of Memphis, which sounds like our military fiction scene showing off the chariots.
Right.
But then Chapter 6 is Whispers in the royal court.
Whispers is never a good word when you're talking about a royal court.
Never. That's where the knives come out.
It makes complete sense, though. The Egyptian military establishment would be incredibly jealous of this rider from the north coming in and basically teaching them how to drive.
Oh, for sure.
It's a massive blow to their national pride. The Whispers are very likely the beginning of a conspiracy against him.
Which leads us directly into the second major segment, the war. Chapter 7 is titled First Blood at Kadesh.
Now, stop right there. Kadesh is a massive anchor point in history.
Why is Kadesh so important? I mean, I know it's a city, but the title makes it sound like it's the city.
It absolutely was. Kadesh is located in modern-day Syria, and it was essentially the pivot point of the Near East.
Okay.
It's incredibly famous for the Battle of Kadesh between Ramses II and the Hittites, which happened a bit later than when this story seems to be set, but the location itself is iconic. It's where empires collided.
So by placing the first blood there, the author is signaling to the reader that this isn't just a minor border skirmish.
No, this is a world war.
The scale just blew up. We went from whispers in a palace to a massive chariot battle in a single chapter.
And that shift is crucial for the pacing of a story like this. You can't just have political intrigue forever. You need a massive release of tension. The chariot thunder we talked about in the intro,
Yeah.
This is exactly where you hear it.
But the danger doesn't stay on the battlefield. We have Chapter 8, A Gift of Midnight, and Chapter 9, The Siege of the Oasis. But then Chapter 10 really caught my eye. Betrayal in Hieroglyphs.
That is such a fascinating title.
It sounds horrifying, honestly.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be betrayed by a sword on the battlefield, but being betrayed by writing.
But think about the context of the era. In ancient Egypt, writing was power. It was highly restricted to the scribe class.
Right.
Our hero, the Horse Lord, is very likely illiterate when it comes to Egyptian script. He's a warrior. He's not a scribe.
So he's completely vulnerable to it.
Completely. A betrayal in hieroglyphs implies some sort of bureaucratic coup, maybe a forged order, a secret intercepted message, or a law passed that suddenly condemns him.
Yeah.
It highlights that no matter how incredible he is with a chariot, he can still be utterly destroyed by a piece of papyrus.
That is terrifying. It's literally like being sued in a language you don't even speak.
Exactly. And that feeling of helplessness forces the story to pivot once again. We've done the romance, we've done the military tactics, we've done the politics.
And now we get to the magic.
Yes. Looking at Chapter 11, we fully hit the epic fantasy genre.
Because Chapter 11 is Chariots of the Storm God.
Here is the big Indo-Aryan payoff.
Now, the source material included a note about an AI Vision Magic video description that specifically mentioned Indo-Aryan chariot thunder. Are we talking literal magic here?
Given the epic fantasy genre tags, I think we have to assume yes. The Indo-Aryan storm god, Indra, was a fierce warrior deity.
Right.
He wielded the thunderbolt. He was famously known as the breaker of forts.
So the Horse Lord is tapping into his own gods at this point.
It certainly seems so. When the Egyptian bureaucracy completely fails him, when the hieroglyphs betray him, he turns back to his own heritage. He calls down the storm.
Oh, that's awesome.
It creates this amazing thematic contrast. You have the very orderly, solar-based magic of Egypt going up against the chaotic, thundering storm magic of the north.
It changes the stakes entirely. It goes from winning a battle to literally wielding the forces of nature.
Which naturally escalates right into Chapter 12, The Price of a Kingdom.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
Magic always has a cost in these stories. If he summons the storm god, what exactly does he have to give up in return?
Well, Chapter 13 is Heart of the Lion, which might refer to as bravery, maybe. Or maybe the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet.
Sekhmet was a terrifying lioness of war. She nearly wiped out all of humanity in the Egyptian myths. If the hero is displaying the heart of the lion, he might be earning the respect of the Egyptian gods, or maybe he's having to become a monster himself just to survive the war.
But then we get to Chapter 14, Bargain with the Underworld.
This has to be the climax. This is that destiny-defying moment they promised in the blurb.
Are we going full Orpheus here? Is he physically going to the afterlife?
You know, the Egyptian concept of the afterlife, the duat, was very real to them. It was a literal, physical place you traveled to.
Okay.
But the word bargain suggests a trade.
A life for a life.
Most likely. Remember that forbidden passion. If the princess is threatened or killed or destined to die, the Horse Lord might have to trade his own soul or his own future just to save her.
Wow.
It fits the epic fantasy genre perfectly. You have to descend into the darkest place imaginable to bring back the light.
And finally, the resolution. We end with Chapter 15, Throne of Two Lands.
The Two Lands refers to Upper and Lower Egypt, a unified kingdom.
So order is finally restored. But the title is a little tricky. It doesn't say the Horse Lord's throne. It just says Throne of Two Lands.
It implies that the institution itself survives the war. But does the hero, does the romance survive?
Or does he have to leave to ensure the throne stays safe?
Right.
Like the classic cowboy rise away ending.
Or perhaps he just becomes the quiet power behind the throne, the steel that constantly supports the gold. It leaves it open, but it definitely promises some kind of resolution to all this chaos.
So, zooming out a bit here, we've got this huge mix of history, romance, and magic. The voiceover script they provided actually says, quote, "In an age of empires, a bond of steel and silk."
Yeah.
Why does this specific mix work so well? Why are we seeing this trend of historical romance being blended with this kind of grit?
I think it's because fundamentally we're always trying to humanize the monuments.
Humanize the monuments, I like that.
When you look at the Sphinx, it's cold, it's just stone. But when you inject romance, modern, messy, highly emotional romance into that ancient setting, it suddenly becomes accessible to a modern reader.
It bridges the gap.
It really does, but it also raises a really interesting question for you as the learner. We are projecting our very modern feelings onto Bronze Age people.
Right.
Did a Mitanni warrior really care about true love? Probably not in the way we do today. He cared about duty, his clan, and his honor.
We were basically distorting history to enjoy it.
In a way, yes. But if that distortion makes you realize that these were actually real human beings who felt fear and anger and desire, well, maybe it's a necessary distortion.
It turns names on a tomb wall into actual people.
Exactly.
It reminds me of the visuals mentioned in the description, setting up the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia right against the fertile banks of the Nile. The story clearly wants us to feel the heat, not just read the dates off a timeline.
Geography was absolute destiny back then. The Mitannis were people of the open plains, which is exactly why they had the horses and chariots. Egypt was the people of the river.
Yeah.
The story forces these two very different geographies to crash into each other. It's almost like a road trip through the environment of the Bronze Age.
Now, for anyone listening who is ready to jump right into their chariot and read this, the source material lists this as a multi-platform release. It mentions Apple Books, Gumroad, Payhip, and the Story Buddies Play website. But currently, all the links are marked as coming soon.
Ah, the classic anticipation engine.
It's the worst, isn't it?
Yeah.
But honestly, getting this deep dive into the metadata and the chapter structure is almost like getting a full trailer before the movie comes out.
It is.
We know the shape of the story now.
We know the architecture of it. We know it's trying to tell a massive story about the first superpowers through the very intimate lens of individual passion.
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway for today. Mitanni Horse Lord isn't just a romance novel, and it certainly isn't just a dry history book.
Right.
It's an attempt to answer the question, what happens when the immovable object of Egyptian tradition finally meets the unstoppable force of Indo-Aryan chariots?
And apparently the answer is a whole lot of drama, a little bit of magic, and a desperate bargain with the underworld.
Which honestly sounds like a pretty average Tuesday in the Bronze Age.
It probably was.
I want to leave you with this final thought today. We so often look at history as just a series of inevitable events. Empires rise, empires fall.
Right.
But stories like this remind us that in the moment, nothing was inevitable. It was just people making bad decisions, falling in love, and hoping the storm god was on their side.
If historical fiction uses modern emotions like romance to make the past accessible, does it distort our understanding of history? Or is it the only way to truly humanize figures who are otherwise just names on a tomb wall?
That is the question. We'll be watching closely for that release date. Until then, thanks for exploring the Bronze Age with us.
My pleasure.
Keep looking for the stories in the stone. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.